Hey now everybody, welcome to inglit.org. This is Professor Island, and today we are discussing the Latino literature course, actually the American Latino literature course, English 216. If you go to inglit.org, englit.org, you will find a link to American Latino literature under the on-campus literature courses. And when you click on that, you will be at the main website. Because this is an on-campus course, I don't use Canvas for the course or Blackboard or any other thing like that. Everything we're doing is in class, but I do give you a web presence because there are certain elements of the course that are enhanced by internet access, and this includes the fact that you'll notice that there is no book assigned for the class. This page here will give you access to the things that you need for the course, including your syllabus. If you look at the course description, the course calendar, and the grading policy, that essentially makes up the syllabus that I hand out to you in class, in case you happen to lose the one that I give you. Another element that'll be important to you is the literary terms section, and certainly for your analysis, you are going to be utilizing not only the critical perspectives, critical approaches that you would have learned or that you would learn in an English 103 class. And by the way, if you've not taken English 103, you will learn about these as the class goes on. But also other elements of evaluating literature that might be useful for the specific Latino works that you will be trying to translate to trying to evaluate and to assess through these critical perspectives. And that includes elements that might be either of children's literature, something that might be of the Gothic, although that's probably going to be pretty rare. Although there is some horror work associated with authors from the Latino culture, and specifically George Romero comes to mind right away. But also other elements. For example, if you're going to do a film, a movie, a video, something like that, these cinematic film elements will be useful. And if there's a play like Los Vendidos or something along those lines, that would be useful. And obviously, if you're going to be analyzing lyrics or poetry, these resources down here will be useful. Remember that what you're doing for me in this class is going to be literary analysis. And ultimately, you're going to be choosing one work to analyze, and the development of that paper will occur in stages over the course of the semester, and that's where the course calendar comes in. If you check out the course calendar, there are basically 4 sections that you should be aware of, and not all 4 sections occur for every week, but certainly for the first few weeks they will. The first has to do with the writing strategies, and these are things like writing about literature, objectivity and analysis, what I expect in out-of-class papers. These are about formatting issues, and these formatting issues are certainly going to be elements of developing a paper that are necessary. In other words, you're writing a college-level paper, you should know how to cite something, you should know how to quote something, you should know not to mention yourself, you should know to support any claims you make with some kind of secondary source material. The other thing that you're going to be doing is applying some critical perspectives, anywhere between 4 and 7 realistically on that final paper. And certainly I'm going to be giving you links to those critical perspectives here in the critical perspective section, and we'll go through those as we go through the semester. The other thing is going to have to do with just general literary analysis, and as we go through the semester, we'll cover poetry, then we'll cover some drama, and then we'll cover some fiction. And in doing so, we need to talk about how these literary types affect a work. In other words, how is a song different from a poem that is not sung? How is a fictional story like Woman Hollering Creek different from a play like Los Vendidos? And it has a lot to do with the author's methodology and why they've chosen a particular methodology to get their story across. And then finally, of course, you have the primary sources themselves. These are the works that we're going to be analyzing, and we'll start off with some Joan Baez and other lyric and poetry bits, and then we'll get into some plays, or at least one play, and then we'll get into some fiction pieces. Just to give you a flavor, so that way, whether you're doing poetry or you're doing lyrics, or you're doing drama, or you're doing a story for your final paper, you have a feel for how these things get analyzed and how to apply the critical perspectives and, of course, the resource material. To that end, when you're looking at these elements, you might ask yourself, well, gee, how am I supposed to utilize this information? If you go to the paper format and test instruction page, you will find the elements that have to do with the structure of your paper, MLA formatting, what an outline looks like, which you'll need, what an annotated works cited is, and that you'll need that too. What the paper's supposed to look like in terms of citation, quotation, what a works cited page is supposed to look like. All of these elements are available here. If it has anything to do with the structure of the paper, it'll be right here on the paper format and test instruction page. Likewise, you will find that if you're looking for the research itself, that this INET resource list will be useful. One thing that you might find useful are some cultural context resources, including not only Latino literature, literary perspective, specifically American Latino perspective, but also other elements such as film as literature resources, children's literature resources, and some general literary criticism that will help you to find resources to apply to the work that you've chosen, especially if you've not chosen a work that is generally analyzed critically. Certainly when you think of somebody like a filmmaker like Rodriguez, you know, his material is quite popular, but a lot of the analysis of his work is actually film review rather than film analysis, and you have to make sure that you're finding an actual critic, not a film reviewer, you know, who says, oh, you know, it's the greatest movie ever and it's a fun ride, things like that. But real literary critics like Pauline Kael or Roger Ebert, or one of these folks who actually is going to apply the same literary analysis that we are. Another thing that might be useful to this is the urban legends section and the folklore section. A lot of Latino literature, American or otherwise, is rooted in Latino culture that is heavily influenced by cultural, folkloric aspects. And of course, when you have very specific things like Chupacabra or La Llorona and these other folk tales and influences, and then of course you add in religion, specifically Catholicism, and other aspects of that, you have these cultural influences that inform works constantly. And whether the author is incorporating them in a way that says, I fully believe in this, or they're incorporating them to say, I don't believe in this, but they still affect me. These are important things to understand. And then finally, of course, you have an author's link here. And if you choose an author like Rudolfo Anaya, you need to know who that author is in order to analyze their work. Certainly if you're going to do a biographical criticism, historical criticism when this person lived, Marxist criticism, what the point is of the work, you need to have that kind of information. And certainly I have several elements here that might be useful, and especially for an author who has their own website like Sandra Cisneros. You'll find that they talk about their work, and they talk about what they were doing and what they had in mind, and how their work in some ways informs who they are, and how who they are informs their work. And this is great material for writing your paper. Another element that will be very useful to you that you might find to give you some context is the English literature resource for papers, and we aren't going to be taking any tests, but for papers especially, to give you an idea what a research paper looks like in a class like this. And certainly none of these works here are specifically Latino, but the format in terms of the use of MLA, the use of primary and secondary sources, the use of quotation, the use of the critical perspectives, all of those are in there. And if you read one of these papers, you'll get a feel for that tone and the content, etc. As we go through the semester, you will become familiar with many aspects of the range of Latino literature and its richness. Because as we all know, it's not a single culture as much as it is a collection of cultural influences that can range not only from country to country, from region within a country to another region within a country, but also certainly within generations and even differences between siblings in terms of what they accept, what they reject, what they battle with, what they like, what they hold on to, and how they use it. And certainly, as we examine the authors in class and we talk about these things, it'll help you to create your paper, which we will talk about in class. Remember, you are in a classroom. You can ask questions. You're expected to go to the course calendar and read the works and be aware of them, and then we'll cover them in class. One of the other aspects that's going to happen is during the course of the semester, I'm going to have everybody in the class, either individually or in groups, be presenting the work that's part of the class. And while I have populated the course material with works, I am offering the members of the class opportunities to bring in their own works to be shared with the class, even to replace some of the stuff that I have. What's important here is that we are expanding the understanding as to what Latino literature, especially American Latino literature, is all about, and the range that it encompasses, in order to have a greater understanding of this rich and vibrant culture that has had a profound influence on the American experience, especially if you live in a place like California, the fiery furnace. So anyway, you can always send me an email if you have any questions at inglitguy@earthlink.net. I check my email every day. But also, you're in a classroom. Ask me questions during class. Ask me questions before class or after class. Come and see me during my office hour, which generally is going to be Monday through Thursday between about 2:45 and 3:30. And you certainly will have opportunities to talk to me, to get things clarified. Any questions at all, it's better to ask the so-called dumb question and to move on and to get work done than it is to flounder around struggling with something. So keep in contact, and as always, stay in touch.